Hello everyone, it's me, Robert Landau, your Live Life Well TV host with another astounding, absolutely tantalizing episode of True or False. I am here in the name of fun, and that's what we're going to have for this episode. All you got to do, it's really simple, is just let me know if you think the following happen to be true or false. So here we go. You ready? First question, true or false? The very first tea bags were made of silk. True or false? What do you think? The answer happens to be true. Appearing commercially around 1904, tea bags were successfully marketed worldwide in about 1908 by a guy who we've spoken about before by the name of Thomas Sullivan. He was a tea and coffee importer from my hometown, which happens to be New York. Mr. Sullivan shipped his tea silk bags all around the world. So, next true or false question goes like this. Chai tea comes from Russia. True or false? What do you think? False. Where do you think chai tea actually comes from? Chai tea comes from India. India. Next question for your consideration. Donkeys, horses, mules, ponies, and zebras are all known as equines. What do you think, true or false? I bet you know the answer to that. The answer happens to be true. True. Good work. Here's your next one. The first domesticated animal was the horse. What do you think? The answer happens to be false. The first domesticated animals were dogs and sheep. Interesting, interesting. Next up for your true or false consideration is this. Most of the world's coffee is produced in Brazil. True or false? The answer happens to be true. Upwards of 30% of the world's coffee is produced in Brazil. Next up, the very first Beatles album was called Help. True or false? The answer happens to be false. Why? Because the very first Beatles album was called Please Please Me, and it was released on March 22nd, 1963. Next for you is this. The first actor to play James Bond was Sean Connery. What do you think? Actually, that's true. The film was called Dr. No, and it came out in 1962. So, next is the following. Candy canes were originally made to represent shepherds' canes. True or false? I think you got this one. The answer is true. Yes. Think of the shape of them. Candy canes were indeed made into the shape of shepherd's canes. That's what they actually represent. Next up, yoga originates from Bangladesh. Yoga originates from Bangladesh. What do you think? The answer happens to be false. Where do you think yoga truly comes from? Again, it's that place that starts with an I. India. India. It is thought to have been created in India as far back as the 5th century BC. Wow. Next up for you, The driest place on earth is the Sahara Desert. True or false? What do you think? I can't hear you. Actually, believe it or not, the answer happens to be false. The driest place on Earth is in Antarctica, in an area called dry valleys, which have seen no rain for nearly 2 million years. There is absolutely no precipitation in this region. The reason why this region receives no rain is due to something called the katabatic winds. Winds from the mountains there that are so heavy with moisture that gravity pulls them down and away from those valleys. The next driest place in the world, measured by the amount of precipitation that falls there, is the Atacama Desert in Chile and Peru. Interesting, I would have never have thought the driest place on Earth is in Antarctica. But nevertheless, there you are. Here's the next true or false for your consideration. It goes like this. You use 10% of your brain. You use 10% of your brain. True or false? What do you think? The answer happens to be false. As it turns out, we use virtually every part of our brain, and most of the brain is active just about all the time. Well, I don't know about you, but I think I know some people who only use 10% of their brain. But we won't get into that now, right? Anyway, here's the next question. The royal family, and this is the last question, so you better get it right. The royal family is not allowed to play Monopoly. Let me say that again. Oh, and because you're so good, I'll even give you one more question after this. But here's this one again. True or false? The royal family isn't allowed to play Monopoly. What do you think? Believe it or not, the answer happens to be true, and here's why. During a public engagement, Prince Andrew once admitted that they're not allowed to play that classic board game. He was quoted as saying that, quote, "We're not allowed to play Monopoly at home. Why? Because it just gets too vicious." Somehow I can't picture that, but that's just me. Anyway, here is the last and final question, and it goes like this. In your lifetime, you will have produced enough saliva to fill no less than 2 swimming pools. I think I've lost more than 10% of my brain finding these questions for you this episode, don't you think? But anyway, true or false, last and final question. In your lifetime, you will have produced enough saliva to fill no less than 2, count them, 2 swimming pools. True or false? What do you think? I can't hear you. You know what? The answer happens to be true. The average mouth produces over 25,000 quarts of saliva, which helps protect your mouth from germs over the course of a lifetime, which is enough to fill 2 swimming pools. Wow. And with that said and done, this has been Robert Landau, Live Life Well TV host, with another episode of True or False. One final question, actually. Did you have fun? Did you learn something? Well, if you ask me, the answer to both of those questions, yes. and yes. And I hope it was the same with you too. See you next episode. Until then, here's wishing you health, happiness, fun, and laughter.